So again, welcome everyone, and apologies for the late delay there, but folks are hopping on to today's virtual event, so it looks like we do have audience members filing into the virtual line here. So again, thank you all for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's web event. My name is William Moore with OJJDP NTTAC, and welcome to today's webinar, Wellness Program Implementation Series Part 4, Components of a Wellness Program Chaplaincy. Again, my name is William Moore, and this is brought to you by our colleagues with the Innocent Justice Foundation. Please note that we are indeed recording today's web event. This web event, in addition to past webinars on juvenile justice and child victimization prevention related topics, will be on NTTAC's YouTube page. For any supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk at OJJDP@USDOJ.gov. If you're having any trouble downloading event materials, you can contact me, the webinar host, and I can walk you through on how to access those items. You can also access the items related to today's web event through a Google link that my co-host will post in the chat shortly. And if you need to get access to any items after the webinar, you can always contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at this email address. For optimal audio, please have the WebEx system to dial out to your phone line. When you're connected, you'll see an icon to appear next to your name that will show that you are indeed connected to the audio. Again, any experience of technical difficulties, please message me, the webinar host, directly, and I'll be more than happy to help you with any troubleshooting any technical difficulties. Please note that we would like for you all to send in any questions regarding the content through the chat box. The way you'll do that is you'll go to the chat, you'll select to host or panelist any messages that you want to send. So we want you to please select any panelist or everyone before you send your message, and then you'll hit enter or send, and that will send your message accordingly. Help us count. If you're viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, please go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Again, if you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. Note that attendees will receive a certificate of attendance through an automated email from OJJDP's NTTAC. Please keep an eye on your email for your certificate. Here's the agenda for today's web event. And now I'd like to turn over the presentation to Gabby for the introduction of our presenters in today's web event. Gabby, take it away.
William, thank you for the warm introduction as usual, and thank you to everyone who has registered and is joining us today and carving out a little bit of a very hectic life, as we all know, to focus on some mental health and wellness strategies. This is the fourth part of our series, and so thank you again to the people who have kind of gone with us through the whole thing. My name is Gabriella McGowan. Most of you have already heard me say this, so I apologize for the repetition. I am the program manager for the Innocent Justice Foundation and the Shift Wellness Program. And so just as a very quick disclaimer, we are funded by OJJDP, which helps us create these trainings and programs and deliver them to everyone at no cost. So we're very grateful for that too. One of the things that the pandemic has kind of shown us is that we need to pivot and we need to broaden our horizons, and the best way to kind of reach all of you is through these online virtual trainings, and with the partnership with NTTAC, we can do that for everyone. So very grateful for that. And then this series, again, was created kind of for, for internet crimes against children commanders, their task force teams, and their affiliated agencies. So this is where our expertise lies. But this information that we are sharing with you guys going through this series is very much applicable across the board. And so no matter what agency you're a part of or what kind of organization you are working with, no matter what your position is in that organization, you can take some of this information and basically apply it to your own wellness and to the wellness of your team. So we will mention ICAC and their crimes against children throughout the presentation, but I want you to know that this information is applicable to everyone. And so we created this implementation series to walk you through kind of the basic steps of how to get a program off the ground, the different options that you might want to look at, how you can assess your team, and what you can do to decide which direction you want to go in. And so currently we are focusing on the different programs that you might have chosen. And today we'll talk more in detail about chaplaincy. So without further ado, and ranting from my side, I want to introduce our absolutely lovely, amazing trainers. I'm going to have David on the line with me, as well as Shelly. David, he's the commander of the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Unit. And then Shelly is a chaplain, and so she has a lot of very, very valuable information. David is a chaplain as well, so I just want to let you know that they both come from both perspectives and will give us so much valuable information today. I will be in the chat, so if anyone has any questions or concerns, I'll be chatting with you in there. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of this presentation where all your questions will be answered. And if you have a question that you would not like to share in the chat, you can always email us. Our contact will be at the very end as well. So again, without further ado, Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Gabby. Pleasure to be here. I want to certainly thank OJJDP for hosting this event and for the Innocent Justice Foundation as well for allowing us to present to you this afternoon. As Gabby said, I have the pleasure of serving as the statewide commander for the Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And you're going to hear us talk a lot about ICAC over the course of the next hour and a half. We are one of 61 federally funded task forces throughout the United States with the sole mission of investigating and prosecuting internet crimes against children offenders. So I've been a law enforcement officer for about 22 years now. I started out in Pennsylvania with the Attorney General's office. I've worked internet crimes against children for the last 16 years in both Pennsylvania and Ohio. And I'm a relatively new chaplain. I think you're going to see how my experiences and Shelly's experiences are quite different. I'm very new to this. I'm very new to faith and religion in general. I became Catholic in 2013, right in the midst of my work as an internet crimes against children investigator. About the time that we were trying to develop a mental health and wellness program, I realized that I needed a little more faith in my life. And so I tried to tie in what we were doing as an ICAC unit, what I do as a supervisor, to that faith side. And that journey led me to the chaplaincy program. And it's been very helpful in terms of kind of tying everything we do from the law enforcement side to the mental health and wellness side together to make us a better task force and a better group of law enforcement officers. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll let Shelly introduce herself.
Well, hello, I'm Shelly Pinamaki, and I have been a chaplain with the San Diego Sheriff's Department for quite some time now. We're also on the leadership team at the department, and bringing chaplaincy into the wellness program has been huge. Now, it was already there before I joined the Sheriff's Department, and in San Diego as well. Our San Diego Police Department is very well known for their wellness program and how they have implemented it. They've been recognized nationwide. So we have an amazing opportunity to showcase all three parts, or what we call the triad of care, which is your counseling team, psychological help, then you've got your peer support, and then you have chaplaincy. And so what this presentation is really to go in is why do we add a third part to that? Why do we add in chaplaincy, and what does a chaplain even mean? Given this presentation, I give it around particularly all of San Diego County of what does a chaplain mean, and actually currently working with one of the cities that's in San Diego County to develop and add to their wellness program the chaplain component. And so we're going to go very much into that. I have been teaching chaplaincy and doing chaplain academies for a number of years now. Also teach a secular version of that through San Diego State University and through other offshoots. Did some things with the city of Encinitas as well to help them incorporate in chaplaincy into their programs and what's going on and what are the ramifications of that. What does that actually look like? I have been in a faith position. I actually belong to a non-denominational church right now. My ecumenical status is with a non-denominational status, but as a chaplain, you're going to see how that crosses over into all of those categories and how we can support, and how chaplains in general can support, whether you are a law enforcement, whether it's fire, any kind of first responders, but also what does that mean about hospitals? What is a community chaplain? There's really 5 different types of chaplaincy. We're going to really kind of concentrate a little more on the law enforcement side, but feel free to ask questions. Well, how does this apply to my company? Why do sports teams have chaplains? What does that look like? What does it encompass? And that's what this presentation is kind of really all about, and trying to answer some of those questions and some of the hot buttons that go around that. I got into chaplaincy, was working as a CISM person, which is critical incident stress management, which we'll talk about a little bit later too, but that it is about caring for people in their very worst moments. And law enforcement is constantly in those worst moments. That's why we have law enforcement, is to take care of some of those things. But in the interim of how do we take care of those that take care of others, that's the wellness program. But how do we also cross over that and take care of the civilian population or whoever their clients happen to be? So I got into that because of those reasons. Own personal story, if you care or want to know any about that, you can always go to my website, seekinghope.com, and check out my personal story. But it was really seeing the devastation that took place within law enforcement particular that drove me into chaplaincy, and have been doing this for many years now, and actually love the opportunity to share and encourage others, organizations, law enforcement, first responders, sports teams, schools, and how to incorporate chaplaincy into their wellness programs. So it's a little bit about me. So kind of talked a little bit more about what our objectives are today, was to give you an overall viewpoint of that. And what was the real purpose of this, of incorporating a chaplaincy, or to bring that along in the wellness program altogether, is that we want long-term. People get into this type of work, whether it's ICAC or whether it's whatever it happens to be, because they have a passion for it. The biggest problem we have is burnout. There's not a longevity. This is emotionally, physically, and spiritually taxing. And when we want to hold in and take care of all 3 components of that person, and when we miss the spiritual side of that, whatever their spiritual beliefs may be, when we don't address those, then you're still only addressing 2/3 of the person. And there's always going to be that that missing link. It's kind of like a 3-legged stool. The stool does not stand up on 2 legs. It needs that 3rd stool, that 3rd leg, to hold up. And that's what the chaplaincy program brings to it. And so that's our objective, is to really look at that, to minimize burnout, to allow people to stay long-term in doing the work that they have been passionate about doing and want to do, and so they can do it effectively moving forward. Is there anything else that you can think of, Dave, on the objectives?
No, I think, I mean, obviously for a lot of people, where to start or how to get started is a big part of this. We struggled early on with our own mental health and wellness program. That was obviously very difficult for us to get off the ground. I mean, funding aside, timing aside, we knew we needed to do it, and we struggled for years to really get something on the books, to have something that we could give to our folks. And I think the same can be said about, creating a chaplaincy program. How we're going to do it, the challenges that we're going to face, the fact that we need to assess it as it goes on to make sure it's working properly. So hopefully those are all things that we're going to discuss as we walk through this today. One of the things that we want to do, and if you've been with us for the last few of these wellness programs, we always talk about the stigma that exists out there, especially when it comes to mental health and wellness. I know we struggled as a task force in creating our program, and more so because we recognize that law enforcement officers, those in the criminal justice system, have a very difficult time talking about their feelings. And so we wanted to really get out in front of that and make our folks realize, as we're doing here today, that, there is no stigma with needing to talk and needing to express your concerns, having someone that's there for you to be able to address some of your own mental health and wellness needs. And I think that stigma especially exists when we talk about, religion and faith and spirituality. Those are all words that, we may talk about ourselves. I know a lot of times I look at Facebook and I see posts about St. Michael, and I know as officers we carry the St. Michael medal, and we talk about being the peacemakers, right? But when we sit with our colleagues, we're hesitant to talk about faith and spirituality. And I think that's something we kind of need to break through, because I want you to remember, right? Faith is not always just about believing in a higher power. Sometimes It's about believing in just the mission or something that gets you up in the morning. And I think that's where, when we start thinking about faith like that, it's easier for us to have that conversation when we talk about spirituality and religion. So it all kind of ties together in that mission there. So when we talk about chaplaincy, let's talk about the basics here. We can date the chaplain corps all the way back to the 1700s, and in this instance, obviously, as Shelley said, we're going to talk a lot about law enforcement chaplaincy, those chaplains that support criminal justice agencies, and I think that's really the important word that you see there, right? We're going to talk a lot today about support. Supporting yourself, supporting the folks that you work with. And as Shelley mentioned, it's really all about support regardless of the denomination. Okay, when I went through the training a few years ago, I entered as a Catholic. I was a baby Catholic at the time. I had only become Catholic several years ago, and I really didn't know what to expect. Obviously, I understood that there was a spirituality component to it, but I remember them stressing time and time again that, you're non-denominational. When you kind of put on that chaplaincy, robe or whatever it is, when you kind of switch hats, you're helping people regardless of their denomination. And I think that's important because it helps us kind of, set that religious aspect aside for a second, regardless of, of what we are from a religious standpoint, right, and really approach people just as human beings. So, fully ordained, the thing here, obviously, that complete confidentiality approach. And this is something where I struggled early on. When I wanted to go through the chaplaincy program, I remember thinking that I was going to use it to support my people. Now, I serve as a supervisor to about 11 to 15 folks. I'm the head of the task force for the state of Ohio. I realized within hours of completing the program that it was going to be a little difficult for me to wear both the supervisor hat and the chaplain hat. So it's required a little tap dancing on my part. It's seen me go out and support folks that maybe I don't supervise. I've gotten involved in some critical incident stress teams here in the Cleveland or Northeastern Ohio area. But, you know, I obviously want to maintain that confidentiality. I want people to be able to come to me and be that support for them. So keep that in mind as well as you consider starting a program that, you know, first and foremost, there needs to be that support, but then also that confidentiality. Shelley?
You know, we've talked about the confidentiality, which is huge. And I'm going to compare the confidentiality privileges between psychologists and peer support and chaplaincy, and they're very different. And that's why the ordination is so important. There's been a kind of a misnomer about what chaplains are, or you say chaplain, what is that? What does that mean? And because it started back in the 1700s, that was really attached to the military. So most people think of chaplaincy as a military. They actually have ranks and everything in the military for chaplaincy. And most of them were priests. So they automatically make some assumptions that it's a religious order. This is what they do, because they were wearing multiple hats. The majority of the time, they're creating a religious service. But the real true portion of what a chaplain does is critical incident stress management. They are doing psychological, or what I prefer to call emotional first aid. They, for lack of a better term, I like to call on myself I'm a rent-a-friend. I'm away from it, so I'm not so personal with them that they know, who I am, what I do, what my kids' names are, and all of that. But I'm set back from that. But I can offer them that same support and be an outside perspective. And that's what a chaplaincy really does, is it includes that whole person that's a little bit outside of that can offer the support in that. And it's about stress reduction, but it's also about stress management. And that's when you're in the middle of those crises, and it leads to a less threatening atmosphere when a chaplain shows up to any critical incident scene. I've been on a number of them. And as soon as my presence shows up, the entire mood changes, not only from the law enforcement side, but also the people and the civilians that we're serving. There's a different attitude that seems to take place because I'm there for their emotional support. If I get the opportunity to go to a spiritual side, I will, but that's not what a chaplain's first directive is. We're going to talk about the Maslow's law and what that looks like, but I'm there to make sure they're physically okay, manage that stress level from a physical perspective, then from an emotional perspective, and then to a spiritual perspective. And it goes in that order. And so being a chaplain doesn't automatically say, well, it's a religious person. It's really about what our fundamentals are and what we think about religion is. If Mother Earth is your higher power, or whatever it happens to be, that you find, the ability to reduce your stress in nature, then I'm going to key off of that, and we're going to talk and go in those directions. And that's really what the chaplaincy does. We're outside of the scope of command. So whether I can talk one-on-one with a commander, and I can talk one-on-one with an officer or a deputy, and I am working the exact same situation, but differently to whoever I'm serving at that time. And so I'm constantly shifting hats and changing hats. It's not that difficult. It sounds like it is, but it's not. The other thing that's going to come into the confidentiality portion of this is any commander or captain or whatever will come to me and say, I want to know how this person's doing. And I'm like going, then you need to go and ask that person. I could have been counseling with that person. I could have been talking with that person. But I can't tell them what it is. And there's a big difference about peer support in particular. And then because I have an ecumenical ordination that allows me that privilege from our federal government. It's right in the Constitution. And so I'm going to give you also some laws and things that have proven the fact that chaplaincy is okay. And it's just a way that we approach it and to give that stress reduction. But we're outside of the scope of a boss or a commander. They can't come to me and ask those questions. I'm going to use me and I statements, but I'm really meaning chaplaincy as a whole. I get talking too fast sometimes and I do that. So hopefully that makes a lot more sense. The other thing I wanted to Callie, we talk about sworn personnel, that they're reluctant to talk. If they're forced to go talk to a counseling, it's kind of on their employee list. It's in their file, let's say. or it's known by others that they may be seeing a counselor. Or peer support, same thing. Oh yeah, no, hey, so-and-so went and oh, they're on peer support, right? And there's a little bit of some reluctancy. As a chaplain, because you can reach out to a chaplain 24/7, 365, we're outside of the scope of the command, that they call me anytime, day or night, and no one else knows. And so there's no little hedge that they may be talking to somebody. And that's the nice thing about chaplaincy, because we are out of that scope of that command. And it's not just for sworn personnel. I work a lot with the professional staffs, both in the entire sheriff's department as well as the DOJ. So hopefully that makes a sense. We're there for all, not just sworn personnel. I'll make that real clear. When we go down, what does it even look like? It's really what we call a ministry of presence. It's just showing up. It's just being there. That's really the initial thing, is just my presence being there changes the dynamic of what's going on. They know that they can have an informal conversation with me at any time. It's not going to, I don't take any notes. I don't do any of those kinds of things. It's very, it's flexible. That's why I call myself a rent-a-friend. Now I've become very good friends with a lot of people because I've been counseling in some families, even marriage counseling that I'm actually doing. We've been doing it for 6 months now, off and on, but I'm still outside of that scope. And I keep that barrier a little bit, I would say, not as strong as maybe a psychologist would because of what they do, but it's a little bit, it's a friendlier atmosphere. But the basic needs are met by a chaplaincy. Again, physical, then psychological or emotional, and then spiritual. And we're very unique and set apart from psychologists and peer support because we don't run in those circles, and because we offer things that are a little bit different, like our confidentiality. Peer support does not have confidentiality. If you think they do, they really don't, by the laws of the United States. That's the difference. They preach that you should have, or say you need to be confidential, but if push comes to shove and they need to tell somebody, they have to say something, then you need to do that. And they can be subpoenaed into a courtroom and say, we want to know what that conversation was, and they would have to by law. They can't even request that from me because of my ecumenical status, just as a psychologist can't. So they have a client doctor privilege, and they will not divulge either. So peer support does, that's one of the major caveats when it comes into that confidentiality. As we move forward into the, let's go ahead and, unless you've got something, Dave, you want on this slide, we can.
No, I was just going to add that, we talk a lot about, informal conversations. I think that's important that, I remember when I became, or when I grew in my faith, it really kind of forced me to come outside of my shell a little bit. And then equally as much when I went through the chaplaincy program, I worried early on about, was I going to be prepared to be able to minister to people or to support people? And I was amazed at how much it was really just about, as you said, that physical presence and those informal conversations. We will go out and support officers who have gone through traumatic situations. And it's amazing how we can just come in and sit in a circle and really just be there and listen to them. It's not necessarily about knowing what to say. It's sometimes about just knowing they know that we're there for them. We're just the presence, we're there, and what they're telling us really is kind of driving the program. So, that's one of the really fascinating things that I've learned as a new chaplain, is just that, our presence there, sometimes just coming onto the scene, does wonders for these folks who are going through these traumatic instances.
It's almost like giving someone a blanket all of a sudden when they're cold. It doesn't necessarily change the cold, but it creates a comfort, and then it can lessen the stress level. I've seen it as well as showing up on horrific incidences and being able to going, oh, the chaplain's here. Okay, I can take a step back. The one thing about chaplaincy, we're non-denominational. So I am a Christian chaplain, but I have served in particularly the Jewish community, which normally would not be, welcoming to that. When I live here in Poway, when we had the Chabad shooting, and I was the chaplain on call and went out immediately to service the entire Jewish community that was being affected by that. And I knew enough about the major 12 religions that are within my county, because I needed to study those and have an understanding on what they did and what was going on in theirs, and things that I didn't make a misstep or have some issues going in one direction or another. And by understanding their religion, I was able to walk in and they welcomed me and provide the skills, again, first physical, then emotional, and then spiritual. And so that was the big thing, is having spiritual neutrality within the entire program. Within the Sheriff's Department right now here in San Diego, we have, all Christian faiths covered, all from the specific denominations, but we also have rabbis, we have imams, we've got all of those to make sure that our county is covered. And that's what I really encourage when you're building a chaplaincy program. Select a chaplain that is the majority of what your surrounding area is, or what your employment history is in their religious preferences, but to make sure that you don't exclude and try and include some of those to make them feel more welcomed. And we're doing that. It's other non-judgmental. A chaplain does not proselytize. I never talk about converting. I never talk about wanting them to come to my church. We never talk about, what my faith means. That's the last thing we ever go to. And that's only if that person opens the door. That's about caring for the entire person. If they want to go there, then we'll go there. But that's not my first calling. And as chaplains, we build trust in the person that's there first and foremost by asking, are they physically okay? Can I get you some water? Can I get you something to eat? Those types of things. Then what's going on in your head right now? What's the thing that's bothering you the most? How can we support you in that? How can I support you in that? What do you need? And then, because I'm in a chaplain uniform, there's always that, well, aren't you a religious person? So if that's something, do you want prayer? Do you want something else? Is there a religion preference for you that I can find someone for you? I have a Rolodex. I can pull up anything that I need to pull up. Let's go from that thing. So it's very much to understand that we don't discriminate against anything. And that's what's going to keep a chaplain program in any setting, particularly law enforcement or any federal government situation, being legal, so that we don't cross over into those bounds of having a problem in a legal sense. Is when we keep it non-denominational, across the board, no discrimination, and we just provide the support if and when they want to receive it. And so that's kind of one of the big things. The other thing when I talk about chaplaincy, when I get into for a ride along, when I sit with somebody for the very first time, I'm going, do you know what a chaplain is? And they usually look at me and goes, well, it's a religious thing, right? Your religion. And I go, great, let me give you my Chaplain 101 speech. One, confidential and privileged. Anything that says when it's just the two of us and it's understanding confidentiality, there's a quiz that and like a certification that goes along with that when you go through a chaplaincy academy, that you learn what that really means and what's the legality of that. I'm outside of the command, meaning nobody's going to know you talk to me or ever talk to me. I immediately text them my phone number. I am available 24/7, 365. Unlike anything else, you can call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. If something's going on, you've been on a shift, things are hard, I'm there for you, which is very different. I'm available to all. So if your wife or spouse or mom or dad is having a problem with you being a cop, or with you doing anything that you're doing, or they're worried about you, I'm there for them too. We don't just stop at where we're at. That we are a tool within their command. Just like when they all wear their belts, right? They have their gun and they've got their handcuffs and they've got their flashlights and they've got all this stuff. They can just stick me right along their tool belt. Very often when I come up on scene, they're so grateful when I show them, oh good, the chaplain's here, because the people that they're trying to care for or serve, or the job that they're trying to do, particularly with ICAC, their hearts, they have to protect themselves to stay human, because of what they're seeing and what they're experiencing and what they're looking at is so horrific. But they're trying to talk with the parents, or I'm at a death scene, and the person that's there is another family member, and they're freaking out. Once I get there, they hand me over as a tool. Oh, good, go take care of them so I can do my job, because I'm starting to lose it. I'm so empathetic and want to help them, but I can't and do my job effectively. And that's where the chaplain comes in, is helps to bridge that gap, particularly in first responders. And then I'm a trusted source. And that's really important. That's where just building that trust over time. It took me probably a year before they didn't do the Rochambeau when I came into briefing to find out who's going to have the chaplain ride along with them. And now when I walk in, it's like, oh, she can ride with me, or whoever it happens to be. But that's building that trust, and it takes time. So.
Yeah, I mean, my wife would disagree, but it's made me a better listener. Especially with the folks that I supervise. And I would agree that, over time, once they learned, what I had gone through as a chaplain, once I started to be around more for them, it helped them open up a little more. Not that we were suddenly talking about, spirituality and faith and all of that, but my presence, just being there with them on investigations or operations that we went out on, I started to notice how our conversations changed. They became more personal. We started having different types of interactions because it helped me, really understand people better. The program, the wellness program that we put in place, our main goal has been to try and focus just as much on our people as we do on the investigations that we run and the victims that we deal with and the offenders, because we get so caught up in the day-to-day, 24/7 nonstop nature of our jobs that oftentimes we don't think about ourselves. And so that's really where the chaplaincy program for me kind of made me stop and say, okay, we need to find time to sit down with people. We need to find time to, get away from the office and do some things that are personal. And so that presence has been very powerful in terms of, doing what we need to do. The program obviously can look a number of different ways. When you talk about chaplains, in general, they may be sworn, but they may also be volunteering their time when they go out and they do this. My work with the critical incident teams here in Ohio is completely voluntary. We may get a call out in the middle of the day or at night where, a local police department needs some support for a traumatic incident that they've gone through. I'm going to go out on my own time and be part of that group or part of that team to support those officers. That's not to say, as Shelley said, that some of them may be sworn with the department that they work with,
Yes.
but oftentimes they're going to be volunteers, and they're going to be folks who, recognize the importance of being there for other people and providing that support. Almost all of them, as Shelley mentioned, are going to be CISM trained, group, individual. There's a number of different programs, number of different trainings. Yes. And I think that's important because, mental health, emotional health is constantly changing. These fields of taking care of people require a lot of training on our part to make sure that we're providing the care and support for people. And so training, like anything, is an important part of the chaplaincy program. It's recommended that, and I think Shelley could probably talk to this a little better because she's in a much bigger department. They recommend about one chaplain for every 300 sworn personnel. And those chaplains are going to integrate with, other aspects of your agency or your division. Maybe you have,
Right.
EATs or therapists. Maybe you have agency psychologists, peer support. We have a peer support group through our county prosecutor's office. So we're going to work closely with them from time to time to kind of integrate all of this into one wellness package or one support package. Anything that, Shelley?
Yeah, that's why we call it the triad of care. You hear that when you start talking with chaplains, we're part of the triad of care, which is, psychologist or therapy, peer support, and then chaplaincy, because we all have a unique portion that we bring to that. And as a chaplain, we're the only ones that can cross over and go into the spiritual needs of that person. If you've got someone in your employment who is a very spiritually connected person, you know that about them. And when you're treating them, they never treat the spiritual component of that person, you're never going to fully get them back if they're having problems, if they're having issues, because we're not addressing that. And that's where the United States government recognized that if they need that support and we're not providing that, then the agency is being neglectful in caring for the entire person. And that's really where chaplaincy has grown exponentially out of the military to incorporate in all agencies, regardless of what they are. We've got companies here in San Diego. We have like Qualcomm. They have a chaplain on staff. They have one for a couple thousand people, but that's the reason why that 1 to 300 is just a recommended source. You start with one and see where it goes from there. That's just the one that we try to use. In San Diego County, we're one of the largest, counties in a geographical situation here in the state of California. So we do a 1 to 300 because you're not used often, but when you are, you better be trained. You better know what to do and how to handle those situations. Sorry. I'm good.
Shelley, someone asked a question about, we had a slide a little ways back about the fact that chaplains were embedded in the law enforcement culture. And I think that kind of ties in with what you were talking about with regards to the military. I mean, we obviously know that chaplains played a huge role in the military. They still do. And I think, we've, for quite some time now, we've had chaplains embedded in this law enforcement culture as well. I just don't know if they're as used as obviously we as chaplains would like. And then the other question was about, are chaplains sent out on all law enforcement calls? That's probably something, Shelley, that you can talk a little about.
Yeah. The answer is point blank, no. Our team here, so I serve one station in San Diego County. So we have 74 stations throughout the San Diego County. There's 27, 74, because those are the little tiny hub places where they can get gas and refuel and those kinds of things. But we only have 27 that are in the station. Now, my station here in Poway, where I live, I get called out probably maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And those are, we had a double homicide. I'm going to get called out to that to help take care of not only the law enforcement professionals, the deputies, but also for the civilians that are on the side so that the deputies can do their job, collect evidence, keep people aside, be the conduit, be the media conduit, if that's what's needed. But we do not go out on every single call, only if I'm doing a ride along. So I'm with a particular deputy for the day. Do I show up at every single call? I find it interesting. I find it amazing. They kind of call me the Grim Reaper for whatever reason, because when I'm on call, I call it was a divine appointment by God. Because when I happen to be riding along, we usually get one death notification call. And so I go out and do either a death notification or someone has passed away, they need to show up, and I'm there to support the family or the victim's support personnel. No, we do not go out on every call. Matter of fact, I wish they would call me more often. I went into the station actually this last week, and they told me that there was 3 fatalities that I didn't know about, and 2 of them were pretty bad, and there was lots of spectators. And I go, why didn't you call me? Oh, I forgot. I didn't think about that. In law enforcement, chaplains are not really, they're just, let me back up. I think the better way to explain that is with the new culture of law enforcement, the new cops that are coming on don't have a bigger spirituality. We're not in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s where faith was a much bigger component of the culture of the United States. It's just not any longer. And so when they hear chaplaincy, they go, well, I don't want a religious person coming out and managing my scene or sticking the nose in where it doesn't belong. And so they're not really sure. That's why even today I give that chaplain 101 lecture to, or, talk with a brand new deputy because they don't have a clue who I am and what they do and how I can serve them. And I really just said, you know what? I am your best PR. I am there to come into the scene, allow you to go do your job, and allow me to deal with all of these people or what they're whining, they're whining. I need this. I want this. You know, you've got to come talk to me. You have to. They don't have to do anything. So I end up taking that role, doing that, and making it this really nice community situation. They're wanting to tell you when I have more information, I will, and I can go back and forth because I'm in uniform. I am part of the department. I can cross over the yellow tape lines, all of those kinds of things. So I am the best PR possible on a scene. I wish they would call us more often. It would make their jobs a lot easier. A lot of them have kicked themselves later on going, oh, I should have called you. I should have called you. So it just takes time and energy and effort to get chaplaincy to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really up to the departments that we work with. I know as chaplains or as those of us associated with critical incident groups, you know, once we start working with agencies that will utilize us on a normal basis, those agencies seem to get the most out of it. They know what we have to offer.
Right.
But typically with traumas or incidences, we will leave it up to the agency to reach out to, you know, our point person. He will reach out to us as a team and say, you know, they've requested us, you know, today, tomorrow, at some point here, they're going to need our services. So we're kind of at the mercy of these agencies because like Shelley, I see a lot of trauma in Cleveland, and we may only get called out, you know, for 50% of those, 60% of those. And I think a lot of those are the agencies that have worked with us in the past. They know the benefit of having a critical incident team or a chaplain there. And I think, yeah, like Shelley said, we'd love to come out more. We'd love to kind of get out and show the support that we can offer.
So, some of the services are in the challenging times that we have with this. We want to reduce the stress. We want to be a tool to help them do their jobs better, and be that best PR, right? That conduit into that. But we're highly trained with what's going to start PTS, where's trauma going to go, how is it going to affect them? And that's, again, coming back to that being a ministry of presence, just my physical presence there, whether I do anything or not. It changes the dynamic on a scene. We have seen it over and over again. I now have several sergeants that if it's a death, I'm going to call her. If she can come out, she's going to come out because of the fact that they know the difference that it made the last time they were there. And if it's a really big incident or a very graphic incident, and the team has to do a debrief afterwards, they'll always do a technical debrief, but then we'll have an emotional or psychological debrief. Somebody got shot, maybe it was an officer involved shooting. They have to do a debrief. If I were out on the scene, it makes a huge difference when we come back and do that debrief because I'm already doing little tiny debriefings when the incident is going on and checking in with every single person to make sure they're being emotionally supported. And you can tell going on a scene. I was actually just a ride along one day and I'm there. There was an armed robbery. We immediately all rushed code to, it was an AT&T store, telephone store. And I stayed there with the person I was riding. She was a junior in the junior of the team. So she stayed at the place while the others raced off to try and track down the suspects. She was overwhelmed because she couldn't hear what was going on with her team, knew that they were chasing after armed suspects, and was starting to, go, I've got to do this and this and this. And it's like, okay, just come here, just off to the side, take a deep breath, do a little bit of de-stressing worksheets, which is, breathing exercises, that kind of stuff. And within 30 seconds, her entire demeanor changed, her entire approach changed, and we got on it and were able to provide them with additional information. She then thought about looking at the video cameras, seeing what was going on within less than 30 seconds to be able just to jump back on. And that was because of my presence. That particular sergeant that runs that team now, when there's anything, even if it doesn't go what cops would call go bad, they call a chaplain out. And that was another city, and now they've got another chaplain that I've put in that place, and they're doing amazingly well and continue to offer those supports. But again, it's that presence and serving the whole person and allowing them to do their job more effectively. I think we miss that as chaplains, that we think we're there to just offer that deputy that support. But because a chaplain has so trained in trauma and crisis support, that they can release the stress on the deputy or the officer so that they can do their job more effectively, and they don't feel the strain of the incident as heightenedly as they would if a chaplain was not there to take on the emotional baggage of the situation and the incident.
Shelley, when you're working with newer officers or folks who are just coming into an agency, do you find it difficult to kind of teach them or educate them about what it is you can and can't do as a chaplain?
Yeah, they're kind of my favorite to get a hold of because they're not quite as jaded. They haven't created this 20 years of, I'm only doing it this way. So the newer academy graduates are much better. We're actually trying to add to the academy a whole section on wellness, and with all three components, to teach them what a chaplain really does and help to educate them. But I am constantly doing this presentation that we're doing now in little, 3-minute segments constantly throughout my day whenever I'm at the station, to help them to understand what the benefit of a chaplain is. Once I can get them past there, I'm not there to preach. I'm not there to convince them to have a religion. I'm not there to tell them they have to have faith. I'm there to support them. And if they want to talk about faith in their life or what that looks like, or I've explored or I've had questions about that, but I never knew who to talk to, and I didn't want to walk into a church because then they're going to want me there. And so I am that safe zone, that safe place for any of those questions to take place.
Great. And when we think about what our role is, and I want you to look at these 4 bullet points here. What does this look like to you if you have no idea what a chaplain does? When I look at these 4 bullet points here, I think of family members. I think of friends. I think of people that I associate with on a daily basis. I love that Shelley used the term rent a friend because, my friends and family support me. They're a constant presence in my life. At times, right, they tell me when something's not going well for me or I'm doing something wrong, and they provide relief. So, again, I think it's important that we really kind of dumb it down, right? As Shelley said, people look at the word chaplain and they immediately, think about a religious person, right? I think it's an easy thing to do, but the reality of what our role is just to, be there, be present, be supportive. And I think that's why it ties so well into everything we've tried to do as a mental health and wellness program.
The interesting caveat, and I mentioned I was going to try and compare psychologists or the mental health professional and the peer support versus chaplaincy. So let me kind of try and roll that into a thing for you. So if you wanted to, write those 3 things down. So a mental health professional has confidentiality privileges. It's that doctor-client confidentiality privilege. Peer support does not have that by legal terms. Yes, they want to talk confidentially. They're not going to go gossip about you or anything like that. But when it comes down, when it really rubber hits the road, they don't have that protection. Chaplains, because of the ecumenical order, that's why all chaplains we highly recommend that they really be trained and ordained, because then they have the ecumenical status of being able to have the confidentiality. As a psychologist, they have a professional counseling job. That's their profession. Now in counseling, you start to work on as a long-term approach. So you start with one problem and you constantly go back for appointment after appointment and try and root those out and take care of those. Peer support, it's a friendly conversation. Yep, if you want to talk again, let's do that. If you want to grab a cup of coffee, whatever, or we're standing out in the parking lot, let's have a conversation. It's more friendly in that sense. Same with chaplains, with the exception is that we are there to take on those immediate needs. And that's where it comes into how do you meet with them. So as psychologists, you have to make an appointment. Peer support, you can make an appointment, or it's pushed upon you. You have to go see peer support. Or if you know someone who is already in peer support, then you can maybe go ahead and talk to them. Where chaplains, you can call us 24/7, 365. We know that going in, we expect that, that's the way it runs. The other thing that chaplains offer that psychologists and peer support don't is the psychological first aid, or what I call emotional first aid. When you understand the critical incident stress management, that trauma training on how to relieve the stress to ensure that it doesn't go into PTS or PTSD, right? If it doesn't create more of a problem, or to recognize that in those that you are serving, they're coming in late. They don't seem to be going out on patrol as much. They're not pushing that. They're eating more. They're not exercising. They may be going out and drinking after shift more. They are having problems at home. That's where that chaplain understands the trauma. There are few psychologists that are trained in trauma. And if they are, that's all they counsel in is a traumatic incidents, whether it's, it's rape, it's murder, it's all of those really horrific types of things that take place in someone's life. That's all they do. As a chaplain, when you are CISM trained, when you are trauma induced training, you can go over and take care of the salve. I like to say that a chaplain is very much like an EMT. We show up on the scene, we stabilize the patient, we get them prepared so that they can be transported to the hospital. That's what an EMT does, right? Stops the bleeding, make sure that they're going to survive, and so they can get to extended professional help. That's what a chaplain is from an emotional perspective. I come in, I help them maintain that they're physically okay, emotionally get them back into a realm that they can think, talk, and speak. They're not in shock, all those things. And if they need to, the vast majority, and that's what they found out in the military, and there's lots of research studies, you're more than welcome to go look all the white papers up, is that if you address the issue immediately, then there isn't a long-term effect. That's the advantage of having a trauma-trained person to come alongside people. If you're having a burn and you just scalded yourself with hot water, say, or hot oil, if you just stand there and look at, the burn's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, and you're going to have long-term effects. If you burn yourself and immediately put it under cold water to get the burning portion off of it, there's still going to be a burn there. It may go deep, but you know what? You immediately are relieving it. You're creating a situation for better health moving forward. And then the professionals already have a ground to stand on because they're already starting the healing process instantaneously. So chaplains are the EMTs of the emotional world for all that they support. I hope that makes a lot more sense.
And Shelley, we've talked a lot about our work with law enforcement, but how much of your work is with victim services or mental health providers? A
lot. Most of the time when I'm working with law enforcement personnel, I am really just making their job easier, and it's not until much later that they may give me a call on their own. But the majority, I say the bulk of the work that I'm doing is managing the people around them to make sure that that my law enforcement's okay. So it's the civilians, it's the it's the mental health professionals. If we have a critical incident like a officer involved shooting where they have to have a debrief, then there's a chaplain there, there's peer support there, and there is the team psychologist that's there. All three of us are present. We're all sit around a table. There's 12 or 15 of us talking about what happened, and we ask very specific types of questions, very open-ended, to get them to start to talk. Once they start to talk, then we just sit back and listen. The biggest advantage of once you're trained is that I tell them, you're not crazy. You're experiencing what you're experiencing is normal. In this abnormal situation that you find yourself in, you are behaving normally. You not being able to sleep right now, understandable. That would be normal. And when you start to normalize their response to the critical or trauma, that's when they start going, oh, okay, then maybe they need some long-term help, but maybe they really don't. And that's where that EMT kind of theory comes into play. But the majority of the work I do is helping them manage situations and status and areas. I even have psychologists that come to me because they don't want to go within their group because they're supposed to be the one that handles all that support, but they need support. Just as I personally make sure that I have my mental health support team that I can go and talk to. Because if I go and talk to my friends, all I'm doing is putting on them the problem, and they get so overwhelmed because of the things that I hear and I see, and I know that's true for ICAC members. They can't really talk to their friends, their support people, because of the horrific stuff. All it's going to do is injure the person that they're talking to. So that's why a chaplain or a psychologist in those fields are a much better resource for them, because whatever you're going to tell me, it's not going to shock me. It's not going to overwhelm me, and I'm going to be able to be that support. That's part of the reason why they don't like to open up and talk.
You know, and that's where it's been a big benefit for us as an ICAC task force. You know, we are in crisis pretty much all day that we're at work. And I say that because, you know, for us as a unit, our federal grant mandates that we work nothing but internet crimes against children. When you think that about 97% of all of our cases involve child sexual abuse material, I think you begin to understand how it's a constant crisis for us. It's a constant trauma situation where our forensic examiners, their 8 hours of a day is spent looking at child sex abuse imagery and video. Our investigators triaging tips that come in from the National Center, 99% of those that contain child exploitation material. So, you know, creating the wellness program, bringing in the chaplaincy piece of it, extremely important for the safety of our team members, to be able to know that that presence is there, for me to be able to focus on the mental health and wellness of our people just as much as we do the work that we do on a daily basis. We've started in sort of an out-of-the-box thinking with regards to mental health and wellness that's allowed us to kind of take part in some mental health activities on duty, sort of step outside of our role as investigators, forensic examiners, civilian analysts, and take a break, if you will. Because ultimately, we're trying to reduce that burnout. We put a lot of funding, we put a lot of time and effort and training into these folks. It's a failure to me that these folks, you know, a few years after they start, say, I can't do this anymore. I don't like what I've become. I don't have any fallback in terms of a support system. That's really what led us to create these resources and these programs years ago, is we had an investigator who came to me and said, I just don't like what I've become. And without those support systems, she basically went on to another job, and I really had nothing to provide to her other than a basic employee assistance program that at the time was not up to par, and we lost a good employee because of that. So, you know, we're trying to reduce burnout, we're trying to reduce the compassion fatigue and the vicarious trauma, but it's something that we really have to stay up on. We've got to be there, we've got to provide that constant support, and that's where the chaplaincy program and the mental health program comes into play.
I would agree.
And again, like I said, it's ongoing. I think I touched on this already, but you know, it helps put things in perspective. I'm constantly reminding people of the why they do this job, right? None of us in law enforcement are doing this because we're getting rich or because we're becoming overnight celebrities, right? We have to remember why we got into this job in the first place. I'm constantly reminded of it every time we go out and we rescue a child from trauma or from victimization or exploitation. Every time we put handcuffs on an offender, you know, it helps us remember why we got into this in the first place, but then it also makes us realize what's really important out there, and that's our friends, our family, you know, our personal lives, because we need to tie those into what we do in order to avoid being burned out or, you know, losing that perspective. That leads to that healthy connection, right? As Shelley said, it's difficult for us to be able to talk about the work that we do. If you're in law enforcement, you know, you're not going home and saying, you know, your wife says, how was your day? And you then lay out in graphic detail exactly what happened, all right? We know that's not happening. You know, it was fine, it was okay, everything's good. And so it helps with that healthy connection, right? We want to build those bonds, those support systems with the folks we work with, because we know we can talk to them. If we have an MHP or a chaplain on staff, you know, it's someone that we can talk to that understands what we're going through. When we went out to find a mental health professional, when we created the program, we knew we needed to find someone that understood what we were going to tell them. And I think a chaplaincy or a chaplain fills that role as well, especially if they're part of the department, because they kind of bridge that gap between the frontline workers and the command staff, and you have someone that you can talk to on a daily basis. And I'm sure Shelley would agree that there's that organizational trust piece, right? That kind of ties everything together, someone within that we can go to and build that trust without having to go outside.
It's important to be a part of that, and that's been the biggest. We had an incident here where unfortunately someone was crushed inside of a metal gate, just the regular gate that was protecting their property, and the gate caught the person and brought them into it. So you can imagine the horrificness of someone being squished. And the family showed up and realized that their mom had been killed. And this little girl goes up to the sergeant and is actually pounding on his chest. No, no, bring my mommy back. No, no, this can't be real. This can't be real. I show up on the scene. They've called me. I'm on my way. I get there. And immediately the first thing he does is, here, take this person. And because he's like going, I can't do it. And I ended up working with that sergeant for a couple of weeks later because he so wanted to help this child. And he couldn't continue to do this. He's like, why do I even continue with this job? If this, it just seems like after time, this is what I keep getting. And it's like, let's talk. Why did you get in this in the first place? Bring them back to what made them want to be a cop in the first place. And it's just those reminders of, you're right, you picked a horrible job, but it's because of the heart and the servant that you are. And I was able to go down that path with them and remind them. But it's because I could walk onto that scene and experience that, do that, and understand that. Their grouse humor, some of the things that, you know, they explain certain situations in a very funny, graphic way. To the average person, that is just the most despicable, horrible thing, but that's how they're protecting themselves and what they see on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, depending on if you're a patroller, if you're an ICAC detective. I mean, you're seeing those every single day. So it's like, well, that's not bad. That's not as bad as this. And that's the other thing, is that when you talk to cops in general or first responders in general, they'll say, oh, this and this happened. It was so bad. And they're looking at you going, okay, that doesn't seem like it's that bad, but it's the worst thing that's happened to, you know, their kid or their friend. And it's like going, I could never tell them what really goes on in my day, because if that's what they think is super bad, oh my gosh, they think, you know, this little brush fire or this was a problem. I just watched and pulled 2 dead children out of this house that was burnt to the ground because they couldn't get out. If that's what your bad is, I can't even talk to you about what my bad is. But as a chaplain, you can come on, you've experienced, you understand, you know what the culture is, when they're going to talk. It takes somebody at least an hour and a half of me hanging around before they ever start wanting to talk. That's okay. I know that's the job going in. Let's go have a burger and, you know, get a soda and see where you're at. And then they start to go down that process of being able to explain. And it's like, well, you're the only person I can talk to because I don't want to hurt anybody else. There you go.
And I think, you know, the benefits obviously are well understood. In the interest of time, we want to make sure we get to some questions at the end here. But just as one point here, you know, when I came out of the program, I remember people being very curious about what it was about, you know, and so being able to talk to them about being a chaplain, becoming a chaplain, that opened up some doors as well. It opened up some conversations about well-being and mental health and the support that we can offer. So, you know, again, all of these are pretty self-explanatory, but they do help us with a lot of different things as we, you know, try and work toward that supportive environment. So the big question, obviously, and I think Shelley's going to help us out with this, I mean, where do we start, right?
Where do we start? If you're looking to add a chaplain program to it, one of the things that that scares most agencies and most everybody else is, well, what is the church versus state thing? The Constitution is very clear on that. There's been several cases that have gone to court, and chaplain programs are held up by our Constitution and our federal and local laws. One of the cases is Lemon versus Kurtzman, Kurtzman, Lemon versus Kurtzman. Great study to read up on and show the legalities of where that comes from so that you can diffuse your agency's issues or problems with having chaplains on board. We're very much a part of this. We're part of this country to start with. The Constitution backs it up. The other is training. Training is the most important part for a chaplain. And if you're just a community chaplain, and I say that in jest, but if you're doing community work for a chaplain, it's very different than a law enforcement chaplain versus a hospital or hospice chaplain. And we actually separate fire department chaplains from law enforcement chaplains because the culture is incredibly different. But a lot of the same techniques are still used. One of the trainings that I really highly recommend, that if you're looking to get into trauma care or think someone is a really good fit for chaplaincy, is the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, ICISF.org. That's one great place to start. Don't reinvent the wheel. I got my chaplaincy academy through Living Shield Ministry. There's a lot of different organizations. CISM is Critical Incident Stress Management. There are several training programs throughout. I actually have my degree or my certification through the University of Maryland, which is the ICISF brand. ICISF, International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, is the founding golden rule for the United Nations. So it's a global organization that covers this type of training. And so I highly recommend going through there. Faith-based nonprofits can help you do some funding. They may want to be volunteers. I am strictly a volunteer. I do all of this work that I do volunteer. Through the Chabad incident, I probably spent 76 hours in a 4-day period, all volunteer. But that's what I was called to do, what I felt God has put on my heart, that I want to serve the law enforcement personnel. It's really important to understand, too, that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There is a whole bunch of programs out there, whatever your local affiliate, whether it's a hospital, if that's more what your program is like, or if it's law enforcement, there are many great programs already in existence. Don't reinvent the wheel. Google's going to be your best friend, but check each one of the training programs out and make sure that, again, ICISF is the gold standard and what that looks like. But don't feel like you have to start it from scratch. There's so much good stuff out there. I even continue still to look at them to update my materials because I get a new aha moment from another agency across the country. The other thing is you have to incorporate mandated reporting. So your state may have a different type of mandated reporting than another state. So that also has to be incorporated in there. What does confidentiality look like? Are they ordained? What does their ordination look like? Are there ecumenical orders? Those are the things that are on the top basis. But please go to Google. It's really super easy. The beginning infrastructure of training, I go to ICISF, and then you should go through Academy. I actually teach at the Post, which is Police Officer Standard Training in California, and I'm certified to teach the chaplaincy program through there. Whatever your system is and whatever you feel good about, talk to another chaplain. There's several. The International Chaplains of Law Enforcement is another one that's another good one to just try and bounce off. But do your Google search. Don't reinvent the wheel. There is plenty of stuff out there for you to start a program and to move forward with.
Yeah, I mean, I went through the International Fellowship of Chaplains pre-COVID. Once the pandemic hit, if there's any silver lining to it, it was that, there's now a lot of great virtual training, a lot of online resources, as Shelley said. The International Critical Incident Stress Foundation is a great resource. They offer both in-person and online trainings, very comprehensive as far as being able to get the skills and the training necessary to move forward here. We talked a lot about some resources, some websites already. As Shelley said, you know, if you do a Google search for chaplain resources, you're going to get a number of great links, great sites that really kind of point you at least to a starting point or to a foundation of how to build this program. And I know that, you know, Shelley and I and any other chaplains that you can, you know, get in contact with, if you know someone in your area, always willing to, you know, kind of help you get the ball rolling, because that's really the big thing here, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. has this great quote about faith being, you know, the first step that you take, even when you can't see the entire staircase. And I think that, you know, when you start a program of mental health, when you consider starting a chaplaincy program, there's a big step you got to take when you really can't see what's down the road there. And I think, you know, if you're willing to take that step, that's the important first step in getting the ball rolling, in finding the support and the resources that you need to be able to integrate or to initiate a program like this.
I would be happy to share. I'm the training commander for our chaplain program here in San Diego, to share our resources with anyone that's looking to do that. You can also find beginning stages of emotional first aid support on my website. There's lots of free videos, lots of great downloads that are all free at seekinghope.com to get you started. But you can always reach out. I have no problems with that, but there's a lot of great resources. You can also find the San Diego Police Officers Wellness Program, which incorporates all three, and what they look like and how they offer that. And that's on the web. Just Google the San Diego Police Officers Wellness Program and they'll download. I got 100 pages long, but it's awesome.
Gabby?
All right. Thank you guys so much. That was absolutely amazing. I got so much information off of there that I didn't know before. So thank you to both of our trainers, and a special thanks to David, who was in the chat the whole time and incorporated these questions, you know, within our training. So I do have a question from the audience. Dave, what chaplaincy department are you with?
So I'm with the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office in Cleveland, but I'm assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force for the entire state of Ohio. So as I said, a lot of my work is with outside departments. I'm trying to bring some of this to my own agency to work with some of our peer support folks, but, you know, we're not as developed as, you know, say the San Diego Police Department, but we're trying to, you know, really incorporate it into what we do. A little easier as a police department than it is trying to, you know, work with a lot of attorneys and civilian staff. So the majority of our department is prosecutors, but we've made a lot of inroads in terms of the mental health program and the wellness aspect.
Great. That's awesome. I'm sure you're going to get some calls and some emails. Thank you so much, you guys. You were absolutely amazing. And thank you for your passion and your dedication and your hard work that you put into this, because it really does show. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing all of this with us and with our audience. If anyone has any questions, you know, to Shelley, to Dave, our emails, again, will be in the PDF version of the file that you can download. My email address is in the chat as well. So if you have any questions or you would like to get in touch with Shelley and Dave, you know, send me an email and I will make that happen. But I have nothing else because, again, we incorporated all the questions throughout the presentation. So if nobody else has any questions, I will hand it back over to William so that he can wrap us up.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Gabby, and thank you to our presenters for providing very wonderful information for our virtual audience. Before we conclude today, I just have a few last-minute items to discuss. As a reminder to our audience, please note that you will receive an automated email from OJJDP NTTAC with your webinar certificate of attendance. Please keep an eye on your email for your certificate. If you would like to get in contact with OJJDP's NTTAC, you may do so through the information on this slide. You can also sign up for our TTA listserv, or you can find us on Facebook and like us there and learn more about upcoming trainings and additional resources on our Facebook page. Oops, all right. You can get in contact with OJJDP's. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. You can get in contact with OJJDP's Help Desk through the information on this slide. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, you may reach out or request training and technical assistance through the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. You can reach the platform at the URL on this slide. A reminder that additional webinars are located on our NTTAC YouTube page. If you would like supporting materials, contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at this website email address. And a reminder that we do have upcoming events with our colleagues at Shift. May 5th is part 5 of our series coming up, and part 6 of the series is May 12th. Please be sure to register for each of these events as they are open to registration now. And then finally, before our audience leaves, we have one last poll question that we would like for everyone to participate. And on this poll question, it'll pop up on your panel there. We just simply want to know, how do you plan to apply the information you learned in today's web event? So go ahead and please take a few minutes to fill out this poll as you leave the web event today. And again, thank you everyone for joining today. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you so much.